Xavier Davis's final hours. The 10-year-old who brought Xavier Davis to justice. Hello, friends. Tonight we step into one of Houston's most haunting cases, a crime that left 3 lives gone, 2 children scarred forever, and a city asking how far betrayal can reach. In June 2021, a quiet apartment became the stage for a night of terror. Inside, a mother, her partner, and their 6-year-old daughter were silenced, while a 10-year-old girl survived by pretending to be dead. At the center of it all, Xavier Davis, a man who thought he could outsmart the system by pleading guilty. Instead, he sealed his fate, earning the harshest punishment Texas can hand down, a place on death row. But behind the courtroom headlines lies a deeper story of childhood trauma, manipulation, and choices that can never be undone. Stay with me as we uncover the final twists that led to his sentence. And if you want more real prison documentaries like this, subscribe now and join our community. It was the night of June 30th, 2021, in Southwest Houston. The air outside was heavy with summer heat, the kind that lingers long after the sun has gone down. Inside a modest apartment at 12101 Fondren Road, 29-year-old Davia Lagway and her partner, 35-year-old Gregory Carhee, were unwinding after a long day. Their children were nearby, an ordinary evening in every sense. But within minutes, that home would transform into a crime scene unlike any Houston had seen in years. Hours earlier, Xavier Davis had carjacked a rented Jeep Compass at gunpoint. It was not a random act, it was the prelude to something planned, calculated, and devastating. When he arrived at the Lagway Carhee home, witnesses later testified that he forced his way in, demanded money, and then unleashed a wave of violence. Gregory and Davia were both shot. Their 6-year-old daughter, Harmony, was killed in front of her siblings. A 10-year-old daughter was also shot, her arm shattered by a bullet. But, in an act of courage beyond her years, she played dead. Once the intruder left, she locked herself and her baby brother in a room, using FaceTime to call her grandmother. She described the masked man dressed in black, and through her fear-filled voice, she saved herself and her baby brother. When officers arrived, they found a scene frozen in silence, phones still on the floor, jewelry untouched, small shoes by the door. Nothing had been stolen. This was no robbery gone wrong. This was an execution. By sunrise, Houston police had begun piecing together the puzzle. Hours after the killings, a burned-out Jeep was discovered in Brazoria County. Inside that charred shell of a vehicle was a phone that would connect directly back to Xavier Davis. Surveillance footage, digital evidence, and witness accounts soon traced his movements that night carjacking, arriving at the Fondren apartment, fleeing afterward. By July 1st, Davis was arrested at his girlfriend's apartment on West Fuqua Street. He was carrying over $3,000 in cash, and nearby was the revolver prosecutors would later argue was the murder weapon. The pieces fit together. Investigators said this was not just a random spree, it was a hit job, and at the center of it was betrayal. In court, prosecutors revealed that Davis hadn't chosen the family on his own. He had been hired. The mastermind was Alexis Williams, the ex-girlfriend of Davia Lagway. Motivated by jealousy and rage, she allegedly recruited Davis to kill the family and even watched via video chat as the massacre unfolded. Her trial is still pending, but the evidence paints a chilling picture of a woman consumed by spite and the man she enlisted to carry out her revenge. This revelation stunned the courtroom. It was not just about one man's violence, but a conspiracy fueled by hatred that ended with 3 lives taken and 2 children left with memories no child should ever carry. Dear friends, in order to understand Xavier Davis, we must also look at where he came from. Davis's upbringing was fractured from the start. His mother became a parent as a teenager with little support. By the time Xavier was 10, his life was spiraling out of control. A court officer who once encountered him as a runaway described him as a boy with the saddest eyes. But sadness soon gave way to anger. He began stealing at 13. By his teenage years, he was already cycling through the Texas Youth Commission. His brother later described brutal punishments at home, beatings with cords, and a childhood filled with neglect. While his siblings managed to escape the cycle, Xavier grew angrier, more reckless. By adulthood, his record was long armed robbery, theft, parole violations, even threats against officers. He spent more years locked up than free. Experts later called him the product of a broken system, a child who never stood a chance. But as the prosecutor would remind the jury, trauma explains choices, it does not excuse them. In early 2025, Xavier Davis finally stood trial in Harris County for the killings of Davia, Gregory, and Harmony. At first, observers expected a long, bitter battle. Instead, Davis surprised the courtroom by pleading guilty. Some thought it was an act of remorse, others a strategy to avoid the death penalty. But if it was strategy, it failed. During the punishment phase, prosecutors laid out every detail: the carjacking, the shootings, the burned Jeep, the revolver, the cash, and the chilling testimony of the 10-year-old survivor. Now 14, she took the stand, describing how she had to play dead to save her baby brother. Her words silenced the courtroom. She was calm, direct, and devastatingly honest. "He kicked in the door. He shot my mom. He shot my dad. He shot my sister." Her testimony carried a weight no forensic evidence could match. Jurors didn't just hear the story, they felt it. The defense argued that Davis was a victim of his upbringing, shaped by abuse and neglect, a man who had been failed long before he ever had a chance. They called for life in prison instead of death. But for the jury, that argument collapsed in the face of the crime itself. When the verdict came, it was unanimous: death. Xavier Davis left the courtroom not just as a guilty man, but as a condemned one. He now sits on death row in Livingston, Texas, awaiting the date when his sentence will be carried out. He is 32 years old, still young, yet already marked by decades of crime, violence, and loss. But this story isn't just about him. It is about the family destroyed in minutes on a summer night in Houston, about a little girl who found the strength to survive by pretending to die, about a system that had to decide whether a man's tragic past outweighed the horror of his choices. As we close the chapter on Xavier Davis, we are left with a story that is as heartbreaking as it is haunting. On one side is a man shaped by hardship, neglect, and anger, a life derailed before it ever had the chance to find balance. On the other side is the undeniable truth of what he chose to do: walk into a family's home, pull the trigger, and leave children to survive in silence and trauma. The jury's decision was not only about punishment, it was about sending a message that some choices, no matter the past behind them, cannot be excused. Yet, through the horror of this tragedy, we see a glimmer of resilience. The courage of a 10-year-old girl who played dead to save her brother, and who later gave voice to her family's story in court. Her strength is what endures. Her voice ensures they are never forgotten.